Welcome to this day in his story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that the first prayer given before the Continental Congress established our founding fathers' commitment to God's providential care for America? Join with George Washington, Patrick Henry, John Randolph, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, John Jay of New York, John and Samuel Adams of Massachusetts, for a total of 56 delegates who bowed their heads to honor this sacred day of prayer.
Okay, so picture this. It's September 7th, 1774. It's about 9 in the morning in Philadelphia, and we're inside Carpenters Hall. And I really want you to try to put yourself in that room. It's early September, so it's probably humid, sticky, you know, that heavy late summer air.
Oh, yeah?
The room is filled with 56 men. And, I mean, we know their names: Washington, Adams, Henry, Jay. We see them on our money in statues. But right here, right now, they aren't statues.
Not at all. They're tired, they're sweating, and they're deeply suspicious of each other. And honestly, they're terrified.
They are absolute wrecks. And they're about to do something that, well, if you saw it on a corporate meeting agenda today, you'd probably roll your eyes.
They're going to listen to a prayer.
Right. And on the surface, the first prayer of the Continental Congress, it just sounds
So dry.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like a historical footnote, right?
Yeah.
The kind of thing you just skim over in a textbook to get to the, I don't know, the good stuff.
The battles, the declaration.
Exactly. But what we're finding in this stack of sources, and we've got Thatcher's Military Journal, letters from John Adams to Abigail, these Library of Congress summaries, is that this wasn't just some empty ritual.
Not even close.
Oh.
It was a moment of incredibly high drama. In fact, our whole mission for this deep dive is to unpack a pretty bold claim we found in the source material.
It is.
That this single religious ceremony was actually the first step toward American independence.
That's a huge statement. We usually think of independence starting with a gunshot or a signature on a piece of parchment.
Right. But the argument here is that before they could be politically united, they had to be spiritually or maybe emotionally united.
Okay.
And to understand how that even happened, we had to look at three things. A specific man, Jacob Duché, a terrifying rumor about Boston that turned out to be false, and an unexpected emotional breakdown that happened in that room.
So let's start with the man, because if you're trying to unite a room full of people who do not trust each other, the person you put at the front of that room matters a lot. So who is Jacob Duché?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because picking the person to lead this prayer was a strategic move. It wasn't just, hey, who's free this morning? Jacob Duché was the rector of Christ Church in Philadelphia. But to really get why he was the guy, you have to look at his pedigree.
I was looking at the notes on his background, and he has this fascinating mix of being like an insider but also an outsider.
That is the perfect way to put it. On the insider side, he's got the credentials. He was the valedictorian of his class at the College of Philadelphia.
1757.
Right. He'd served as Benjamin Franklin's secretary for a while, which is a massive endorsement right there. He'd even gone to England to study at Clare Hall. So intellectually, socially, he's on par with these guys. He speaks their language.
But then there's his family history, and this is the part that really jumped out at me. His dad, Anthony Duché, he was a potter.
A potter, yes, but specifically a Protestant French Huguenot.
Okay, we should probably pause on Huguenot because that's not a term we use every day. Why does that specific detail matter so much in 1774?
It matters because of what the Huguenots represented.
Right.
I mean, these were French Protestants who had been viciously persecuted by the Catholic majority in France. We're talking people who had to literally flee for their lives, leave everything.
So his father comes to America in 1699, basically as a refugee.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stay a poor refugee.
No.
He builds a successful trade, he buys land, he sets up his kids for the future. So Jacob Duché is this living, breathing embodiment of that classic American story, the son of a persecuted refugee who makes it big. He represents religious freedom and success.
Which makes him a very sympathetic figure to these colonists. They're feeling persecuted by England, and here's a guy whose family literally survived persecution and then thrived.
Precisely. He's wealthy, he's educated, but he's got that generational memory of what happens when a government turns on your faith. It gives him a certain gravity.
But there's a big technical problem here, isn't there? This is a Continental Congress.
Yeah.
It wasn't one unified group. You had people from all over with very different religious ideas.
That is the absolute elephant in the room. You have to remember, in 1774, The colonies were like different countries. You had the Puritan patriots from New England.
Right.
These are descendants of people who left England because they thought the Church of England was too corrupt, too pompous, basically Catholic light. They hated the rituals, the prayer book.
That's sitting right next to them in that humid room you have.
Anglicans from the South. Virginia, the Carolinas, these are members of the Church of England, the very church the Puritans couldn't stand. And then, just to make it interesting, you throw in the Quakers of Pennsylvania.
And the Quakers are a whole different ballgame.
Totally. They're pacifists, no paid clergy, no formal liturgy. They literally sit in silence until the Spirit moves someone to speak.
So some of them didn't even think they could pray together. Like, they thought it might actually be a sin to join in a prayer with these other groups.
It was a very real barrier. John Adams wrote about this. There was a real fear they couldn't worship together because the divide was just too wide. So picking a leader was a minefield.
Pick a Puritan, the Anglicans walk.
Pick a Quaker, and nothing happens. Pick an Anglican, and the New Englanders feel like they're praying with the enemy.
So how on earth did they land on Duché?
It was a nomination by Samuel Adams. Now, Sam Adams was a strict Congregationalist, a Puritan through and through, but he stood up and nominated Duché, an Anglican. It was a brilliant political move, an olive branch to the Southern delegates.
And Ben Franklin supported him too.
Right. They needed someone who was in good standing with other Christian denominations. They needed the safe choice. John Adams called him a respected minister with excellent public speaking skills.
The hope was that he could just satisfy all members.
Exactly.
It's funny you use the word moderate, though, because there is a massive irony here we have to point out.
Yeah.
Duché wasn't exactly a firebrand revolutionary, was he?
No, and that's the great twist. Jacob Duché was actually a voice for reconciliation. He wanted peace talks. He did not want a war with England. He was a let's work this out kind of guy.
And yet he's chosen to lead the spiritual charge for a group that is standing on the absolute precipice of war.
The universe has a sense of humor.
Okay, so we have the man in the middle, Jacob Duché, the compromise candidate. Now let's talk about the room itself. The sources describe the atmosphere as sober, but that feels like a very polite 18th century way of saying incredibly tense.
Sober is a massive understatement. You have to remember what was happening outside that hall. England was sending troops. They were enforcing the intolerable acts. The port of Boston was closed. They felt the noose tightening.
But there was something very specific that had happened just hours before this meeting that ramped the tension up to, like, an 11. The notes call it the rumor of the cannonade of Boston.
This is the critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Without this, the prayer makes no sense. The morning of September 7th, the day of the prayer, was the day after they got the news about Boston.
And this isn't like a tweet where you can verify it in 5 seconds. How did they get this news, and what did they think was happening?
Well, information traveled at the speed of a horse, and rumors changed along the way. The report that hit Philadelphia was that the British Navy had just bombarded Boston with cannon fire.
So as far as George Washington and John Adams knew, Boston was gone.
Yes. They believed the city had been destroyed by armed soldiery. The source material has this haunting phrase. They believed humble households were being wasted. They were picturing homes burning, the British Army marching through rubble.
Just stop and think about that. These men are sitting in Philadelphia. Many have family in Massachusetts. They walk into this meeting believing that the war has already started and an American city is burning to the ground.
It completely changes the psychology of the room. They weren't there to debate tax policy. They were mourning. They were angry. They were terrified that Philadelphia or New York was next.
It's a room full of men thinking, are we dead men walking? Is this treason? Are we next?
Exactly. It's a powder keg of emotion. And into this heavy, suffocating atmosphere steps our Anglican minister, Jacob Duché.
So it's 9 a.m. Duché walks to the front. He's supposed to be the safe, scripted choice. How does he start?
He starts exactly as you'd expect. He opens his prayer book, the Book of Common Prayer, and he begins reading several prayers in the established Anglican form. It's liturgy. It's safe.
Okay.
But then he gets to the song for the day. And this is where history gets a little spooky.
Or providential, depending on your worldview.
It really does. Because in the Anglican tradition, you don't pick your favorite psalm. There's a set one for every day of the year. The calendar picks it. And the psalm for September 7th just happened to be Psalm 35.
John Adams wrote to Abigail about this. He was clearly shaken. He said, "It seemed as if heaven had ordained that psalm to be read on that morning."
And we should clarify for anyone who hasn't read Psalm 35 lately, this is not "The Lord is my shepherd."
No, I have the text that Adams quoted here. It is intense. It says, "Plead my cause, O Lord, with them that strive with me. Fight against them that fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler. Stop the way against them."
Fight against them that fight against me. Just imagine hearing those words when you believe the British Army has just leveled Boston.
It sounds like a war cry. Draw out also the spear. It's incredibly aggressive.
It validated everything they were feeling. They felt attacked. And here comes their holy text basically telling them, God is on your side in this fight. God will take up the shield.
Yeah.
It stopped being a religious reading and started feeling like divine permission.
So the room is already buzzing. The coincidence of the psalm has everyone's attention. Duché finishes the reading. And this is where he goes off script.
This is the pivot, the aha moment. Adams writes that Duché, quote, unexpectedly to everybody, struck out into extemporary prayer.
Extemporary, meaning he improvised.
He just went for it, closed the book.
Yeah.
Which for an Anglican minister in a formal setting, that's shocking. They loved the book. They loved the script. But Duché realized the script wasn't enough for this moment. He just started speaking from the heart.
And he didn't just pray in generalities. He got specific.
Very specific. He prayed for America, for the Congress. But most importantly, and this must have sent a shiver down their spines, he prayed for the province of Massachusetts Bay, and especially for the town of Boston.
The very town they thought was burning.
Exactly. He brought the elephant in the room right up to the altar. He asked for divine interposition. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was just channeling the raw fear of every man in that room.
I want to focus on the reaction to this, because these are stoic Enlightenment men. They value reason and control. They're not prone to public displays of emotion, but the sources suggest they completely lost it.
It broke them. That's the only way to put it. The reaction was visceral. Adams wrote that the prayer filled the bosom of every man present. He said it was enough to melt a heart of stone.
There is a description from an 1875 Library of Congress placard that paints this picture of the room, and it's almost cinematic. It describes the physical posture of these famous men.
It's an amazing image. You have George Washington, a man we picture as so rigid and composed, kneeling on the floor.
Which is an Anglican posture, yes.
It is. But kneeling is also a posture of total submission, of vulnerability. Then you have Patrick Henry, Randolph, Lee, and Jay standing, and side by side with them are the Puritan patriots, the guys who hate Anglicans, bowed in reverence.
But the part that really struck me, the part that Adams seemed most surprised by, was the Quakers.
The Quakers are the key. Adams wrote, I saw the tears gush into the eyes of the old, grave Pacific Quakers of Philadelphia.
Tears gush! That is such strong language for John Adams. He's not a guy who uses hyperbole about emotions.
And think about who the Quakers were. Pacific, meaning pacifists. They were generally opposed to conflict. They were the ones who wanted to stay out of it. And here they are, weeping openly.
So why were they weeping? Was it just the fear?
I think it was a shared vulnerability. In that moment, the theological walls just crumbled. The political disagreements faded. They were just men who were scared for their country, scared for their friends, uniting in a plea for help.
That seems like the moment they stopped being representatives of Virginia or Massachusetts or Pennsylvania and started being Americans?
That is the critical takeaway. The source material argues this prayer was the first step toward American independence. And that's a profound thought. We usually look for the start of independence in, legal documents or battles.
Right, the Declaration, Lexington, and Concord.
But the argument here is that you can't have a political union until you have a spiritual or emotional one. You have to feel like one people before you can act like a nation. And that morning, with the rumors of Boston burning, they became one people.
They found a common reliance on something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And this wasn't just a one-off. The notes mention this, set a precedent for how Congress operated from then on.
Yeah, the journals of the Continental Congress, they have other examples like Thanksgiving prayers and fast proclamations.
It established a pattern. This first prayer explains the founders' commitment and confidence in God's providential care. It became standard operating procedure. In a crisis, they would turn to prayer as a collective action. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a survival strategy.
It really challenges that modern view of the founders as these purely secular deist political operators. This was a raw, active religious experience.
Absolutely. When you picture Washington kneeling and the Quakers weeping, you realize these were men under immense pressure looking for an anchor, and for that moment, Jacob Duché, the peace-loving Anglican, provided it.
There's one final twist to this story that I think we have to mention. We talked about the rumor of the cannonade of Boston.
Yes, the fake news of 1774.
It turned out to be false, right? Boston wasn't destroyed.
Correct. The rumor was false. The city was standing. But here's the thing. The effect of the rumor was real.
The fear was real.
The fear was real, and the reaction to that fear was real. The catharsis of the prayer, it galvanized them. By the time they found out Boston was actually okay, that bond had already been forged. The emotional work was done.
It's almost like the rumor was the catalyst they needed to drop their guard. They hadn't thought Boston was burning. Maybe they would have just politely listened and gone back to arguing.
I think that's very likely. Crisis creates unity. And in this case, even a perceived crisis was enough to weld them together. It forced them to realize that an attack on one was an attack on all.
So bringing this all home, we've unpacked the man, the moment, the prayer. What's the big takeaway for us today?
I think the big takeaway is about the nature of unity. We live in a pretty fractured time, a lot like 1774. And we often look for unity in, political compromise. You give a little, I give a little.
But this story suggests real unity is different.
Right. It suggests that the deepest unity comes from shared vulnerability. They weren't united because they drafted a perfect treaty that morning. They were united because they were all scared, they all admitted they couldn't do it alone, and they all bowed their heads together.
That's a powerful distinction. It raises a question for anyone listening, right? In our own moments of crisis, what is the role of that shared vulnerability?
It forces us to ask, can we ever really be united if we just stick to our political posturing? Or do we need a Carpenters Hall moment where we drop the guard and admit we need help?
It suggests that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't a speech or a vote. Sometimes it's just kneeling down side by side with people you disagree with and weeping.
Tears, not bullets. That's where it began.
And on that note, we'll leave you to think about the tears of those grave Pacific Quakers. Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.